Page 284, Formation of Fossils. The fossil record, and thus the record of the evolution of life, is not complete. Many species have lived in environments where fossils do not form. Most fossils form when organisms and traces of organisms are rapidly buried in fine sediments deposited by water, wind, or volcanic eruptions. The environments that are most likely to cause fossil formation are wet lowlands, slow-moving streams, lakes, shallow seas, and areas near volcanoes that spew out volcanic ash. The chances that organisms living in upland forests, mountains, grasslands, or deserts will die in just the right place to be buried in sediment and fossilized are very low. Even if an organism lives in an environment where fossils can form, the chances are slim that its dead body will be buried in sediment before it decays. For example, it is very likely to be eaten and scattered by scavengers. Furthermore, the bodies of some organisms decay faster than others do. For example, an animal with a hard exoskeleton, such as a crab, would have a better chance of becoming fossilized than would a soft-bodied organism, such as an earthworm. Although the fossil record will never be complete, it presents strong evidence that evolution has taken place. When a fossil is discovered, paleontologists, scientists who study fossils, analyze the sediments around it. By radiometric dating certain types of rocks and minerals in those sediments, paleontologists can arrange the fossils in order from oldest to youngest. When this is done, orderly patterns of evolution can be seen. Based on existing fossils, Figure 8 shows an artist's idea of the appearance of 3 extinct species that might have been ancestral to modern whales. They are arranged in the order that they evolved, based on their fossils' age as determined by radiometric dating. Okay. Figure 8, evidence of whale evolution. Whales are thought to have evolved from an ancestral line of 4-legged mammals, which are represented here by their fossils and artistic reconstructions showing what the scientists think they may have looked like. Okay, page 286, Anatomy and Development. Comparison of the anatomy of different types of organisms often reveals basic similarities in body structures, even though the structure's functions may differ between organisms. For example, sometimes bones are present in an organism but are reduced in size and either have no use or have a less important function than they do in other related organisms. Such structures, which are considered to be evidence of an organism's evolutionary past, are called vestigial structures. For example, the hind limbs of whales are vestigial structures. As different groups of vertebrates evolved, their bodies evolved differently, but similarities in bone structure can still be seen, suggesting that all vertebrates share a relatively recent common ancestor. As you can see in Figure 9, the forelimbs of the vertebrates shown are composed of the same basic groups of bones. Such structures are referred to as homologous. Homologous structures are structures that share a common ancestry. That is, a similar structure in 2 organisms can be found in the common ancestor of the organisms. Most scientists believe that the evolutionary history of organisms is also seen in the development of embryos. At some time in their development, all vertebrate embryos have a tail, buds that become limbs, and pharyngeal pouches. The tail remains in most adult vertebrates. Only adult fish and immature amphibians retain pharyngeal pouches, which contain their gills. In humans, the tail disappears during fetal development, and pharyngeal pouches develop into structures in the throat. Okay, Figure 9, homologous structures. Last page, biological molecules. The picture of successive change seen in the fossil record allows scientists to make a prediction that can be tested. If species have changed over time as the fossil record indicates, then the genes that determine the species characteristics should also have changed by mutation and selection. As species evolve, one change after another should have become part of their genetic instructions. Therefore, the changes in a gene's nucleotide sequence should build up over time. Proteins. This prediction was first tested by analyzing the amino acid sequences of similar proteins found in several species. If evolution has taken place, then in general, species descended from a recent common ancestor should have fewer amino acid differences between their proteins than do species that share a common ancestor in the more distant past. Comparing the same hemoglobin protein in several species reveals the pattern shown in Figure 10. Species that are thought to have shared a common ancestor more recently, for example, humans and gorillas, have few amino acid sequence differences. However, those species that are thought to have shared a common ancestor in the more distant past, such as humans and mice, have many amino acid sequence differences. Figure 10, hemoglobin differences. DNA sequences. This pattern, however, does not hold true for all proteins. A certain protein may evolve more rapidly in some groups than others. Comparisons of proteins, therefore, may not reflect evolutionary relationships supported by the fossil record and other evidence. Evolutionary histories, however, are generally not inferred from any single protein's amino acid sequences. More accurate hypotheses about evolutionary histories are based on large numbers of gene sequences. These evolutionary histories, based on DNA sequences, tend to be very similar to evolutionary histories inferred by biologists based on comparative anatomy and evidence from the fossil record.